Favorite three letters. Come on, Phil. You know it.
O-G-B.
OGB, baby.
O-G-B.
And
O-G-B.
Phil, let's help people out. What does OGB stand for?
It stands for Old Growth Beverages. It is
Gee, it gives me a tingle. What the heck? What is old growth beverages, Phil?
Why, I'm so glad you asked, Kenny. It's
That's
a
what I'm here for.
micro ground tea. So it's a tea where we take all the tea leaves, we grind them up into fine powder, and it basically takes your process from getting from thirsty, unfulfilled, and wanting a hot, refreshing tea. And it takes that process and it converts you into a happy tea drinker in about 30 seconds. All you need is hot water, a spoonful of micro ground tea of your choice from OGB. And then if you want to top it up with something, and then all you got to do is sit back, cool it down a little, and enjoy.
Welcome to This Commerce Life. We are an unscripted podcast dedicated to small businesses and entrepreneurs in the retail and consumer packaged goods space in Canada and the United States.
I am Phil Chang, co-host and co-founder.
And I'm Kenny Benucci, co-host and co-founder of This Commerce Life.
Our love is the journey to retail, and our passion is sharing that with you every week.
More opinionated than I probably need to be.
That's okay.
About what? Be. About everything? Yes.
Yeah, just everything in general. Does it really matter? I have an opinion on anything.
But I love you, man.
I love you too. It's all good. It's all good.
You know, Kenny, we never dealt with each other directly at London Drugs.
No,
but I always had a lot of respect for you then. And
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm in and out of the business. I've been retired for 7 years, so I'm in and out of LinkedIn every, I don't know, couple of weeks. I'm not that close to the industry, but I watch the news and I see what's going on. And
so much going on.
Trust me, we do too, as you can tell, because I know you've seen some of the stuff we've said online, like some of the comments back and forth. And we'll get into that in a second, because some of it can probably potentially be a little dangerous as a bad choice of words, but it could probably be not sometimes the smartest thing, but that's okay.
It's perilous, I think, is the right term.
That's
right?
better.
It's perilous because it's, if you're in the industry, like
which we are,
you're in the industry, it's smaller than anything really. It's almost more of an incestuous family than it is.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking a couple $100 billion worth of grocery sales, and we pretty much know most of the teams. Yeah. So you're right. It's a large industry in dollars and a small community.
What do they call it? It's like the Kevin Bacon test. No?
7 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
That's sort of what it feels like.
Guys, I respect your passion for the business. I'm out of the business. I've been out of the business for 7 years. So
yeah.
I've got nothing to lose other than the fact that I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income, and I'm kind of pissed off with what's going on out there. I mean, it's time to speak up.
Well, I'm actually glad that you reached out, because we've had enough comments back and forth, like with a few people in the industry, like, with BC Food and Bev, some of the other organizations. There's been a lot of old buddies that I've worked with or around that as well as I do, that have all chimed in. And some of us, again, because we're still in the industry, to Phil's one, a little perilous. I mean, probably not necessarily the brightest moves, but you do get to the point where, shit, enough's enough. Like, I mean,
that's right.
You can pass bullshit as truth for only so long before someone says, seriously, guys, this is absolute utter bullshit. I mean, stop. Yeah. Like, it's enough now. We've had our fun and games. You had your good time, but seriously, this game needs to be fixed. So I'm really happy you reached out. You've been in industry for, even you're retired. I know you're not completely out. You still know people. You still do the talking. You still see people. I get it. So with you, what'll be, so we must do the introduction. So we have Ken Anderson on today as our guest. And I know Ken from Reckitt Benckiser or Reckitt Coleman.
Yeah,
I knew of you then, never dealt with you. Yeah. And obviously the Clorox days, you'd be in London periodically and you'd see people. I'd see you in the hallway, wife. So it's not like it's a small world, right? So, but Ken and I've never really done business together, but he did reach out on LinkedIn. because I think Phil and I went on a rant, probably on YouTube, or I went on a
few
rant.
rants, maybe.
Comment. I've ranted in the past, so it's probably a numerous rants. But Ken, as an for lack of a better way, like an old timer who's been around a long time and seen a lot of changes over the years, asked, in essence, I mean, to come on and share what he sees and what he has seen and what he thinks and where he thinks it could go and maybe where it should go. So, Ken, I'm really happy you came on. I'm so happy you reached out. Next 45 to 60, as we've said before, is yours.
Yeah.
Conversation goes where you want it to go. I mean, Phil and I will ask questions because you're going to be a wealth of information. But really, for the audience, is more who you are, what you did, why you did it for so long. Because anybody who stays in retail this long has to have some issues upstairs. I mean, we're convinced that we have issues, so we're going to put you in that.
We know we have issues.
So really, anybody who stays in retail this long has got issues. So that's where we'll go.
I drank a lot, and that was the secret.
See, there you go.
No,
So anyway, the rest is yours. Start it up.
I love your passion in the LinkedIn comment. Sometimes, I feel like I'm alone when I watch this stuff, and a lot of guys shed what's going on like water off a duck's back. And, just to keep the political correctness, they don't say anything. I've always talked to friends and family about what really goes on in the business. Everybody shrieks.
I know.
When you talk about listing fees, when you talk about, what's involved in running an ad in a flyer, I don't care whose flyer it is, and what the cost is in terms of paying for the ad and paying for the markdown and everything that goes on. But I love your passion, Ken. I had to jump in, and I certainly welcome the opportunity to talk to you guys about.
I'm thrilled.
The industry, as it said. And I think the catalyst for this whole thing was the House of Commons subcommittee thing and the whole interview process with the big three. Let's call them the big three. You watch it and you go, holy Jesus. I guess the upside for it was it was exposure to the consumers, but how much exposure? And it was almost right after I watched, some of the highlights from that whole subcommittee inquiry with the big three retailers in Canada, and watching Galen Weston take it as an opportunity for an infomercial to promote private label and say consumers can save 15% on their grocery bill by shopping private label. If you're a branded supplier, you go, what?
The ones who paid for the listing fees, paid for all the ads, paid for all the markdowns, paid for all the fines, paid for all blah, 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 blah.
That's right. So 38 years in the business. I grew up in Winnipeg, born and raised, went to Red River College. I started with the Bank of Montreal. 2 years with them, a 1-year program for management. Was in my first branch in 11 months. Pretty intensive program to learn banking in 11 months. And I loved it. That 2 years that I spent with the Bank of Montreal was the equivalent of 3 years of university. And, I've heard the expression, if you've been in sales, if you've been in sales, you can be in any business. If you've been in the grocery business, you can be in any business. If you've been in the bank, that by itself was a huge learning curve. And it had huge impact on the way I managed my business through 38 years in CPG, because it comes down to dollars and cents. And that's what it's all about. Yeah, you're selling a product. And that's probably why I left the bank, because in the bank, in its day, there were no online systems. It was all the banking, all the accounting was done in the branch. They were getting aggressive with things like MasterCard. It was all about cross-selling. It was all about selling people into this concept of a credit card. That's how far back it goes. It was all about you coming in to withdraw $15,000 for a car out of your savings account. Why are you taking that money in your account? Why don't we just give you a loan and we'll take care of it? I enjoyed that side of it. I really enjoyed it. And I thought, you know what? I'd rather sell than be a banker. But having said that, it was a great experience. So I applied with a company called Robin Hood Multifoods, which at the time was Robin Hood. It was Bix. It was Stouffer's, and the Stouffer's brand. That's one of my fondest memories because we're talking the 70s. We're talking 1974. Frozen food was in its infancy. It was the equivalent of the health category today. It wasn't embraced by the masses. It was something that was tough to get into a grocery store. You had to perform at a level that was expected throughout the store, and at the time it just wasn't there because it was just at its absolute infancy. We had a brand called Gusto Pizza, which our only competitor at the time was Kellogg's. There were only 2 frozen pizzas in the coffins, we called them, because there were no freezers like what we see today.
I can't picture it because I can't picture that because you walk an aisle now in frozen and it's miles and miles of frozen bunks or doors, right?
It was one line of coffin freezers. That was it. And, we were selling to Safeway Winnipeg at the time. It was a tough sell. We get called in routinely for, what our performance was. But we had fun doing it. It's fun selling stuff that hasn't been fully embraced by the consumer and getting the retailer on side. Robin Hood was a great experience. I started with them as a what they called a combination salesman, and it was a unique concept. Not it would be today, but back then it wasn't, because you had a head office account, you had retailers, and everybody had a retail territory. So you lived and breathed retail every day. You were 100% aware of what was going on at retail because you had to sell those guys. And you walked into the store, you actually created a detail order, you built a display, you had an agreement in terms of building a display, and you walked back to the head office and said, I've got these detail orders against this upcoming ad. It was a pretty simple process, and it was a fun process. I used to go home every night and I'd tally up my orders for the day in terms of, did I earn my keep? And routinely, I got a call from one of the sales senior guys, and I would get that call at about 5:30 in the evening, and he would say, so what'd you sell today? And I'd tell him, it was kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of like being on a sports team. It was kind of like being a hockey. You had the senior guy that had you under your wing, and he was taking care of you. He was pushing you. He was just making sure that you were fully engaged in the business, which everybody was. So that's how I started in the business. We had a retail territory. Everybody had a rural territory. So I covered places like Steinbach, Manitoba, Brandon, Manitoba, Dauphin, Manitoba.
A lot of driving, eh?
All of those Brandon and Dauphin, they all had Western Grocers branches at the time. So you go out and you detail orders with all these small accounts, and then you come back in and bring it into the branch. And that would be on the Friday at the end of the week from that road trip. You tally up all your orders, and you get an order from the buyer and head back home. So from there, I got transferred to Vancouver with Robin Hood. Robin Hood is part of Smucker's now. And as a Western Canada sales coordinator. So that was my first insight into a bigger picture. Spent 2 years doing that, not quite 2 years, and then I was promoted to BC sales manager. Direct sales force. I think we had at the time seven reps in BC. It's going to be nowhere near that today. But it was a different business, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first real exposure, guys, to trade spend. At the time, co-op was 2%. Gross margins were what, 20%? 2 points.
That's cash terms.
That was it. So it's this other thing that came into play, and some guys called it a slush fund. Some guys called it a brand development fund.
Yeah, BDF or whatever.
Yeah, BDF.
Guys like Kelly Douglas would approach you with this super duper promotion. It was a big event, and they would actually go so far as guaranteeing you, volume. but it was over and above traditional cola.
Right.
And you run the promotion. It inevitably ran into about a 3-month forward buy. That was the reality. There was execution in some stores, but not in others. And that was the beginning of this whole incremental spend thing, from my point of view.
So at that time, so you're doing Kelly Douglas. People know it's, if they don't know, Loblaws.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming probably wasn't I don't know how long Jimmy's owned
Oh,
the Pattison Group. I don't know how, if there was still over Waities. Georgia
No, there
Maine.
was Overweighty was there for a long time.
I can't remember who owned it
I
at that
think.
time, though. I don't know if it would have under
I
Jimmy
don't know,
or not.
actually. Yeah.
But we had a lot more. You had a lot more head offices to go see. You could see London. You could see Save On. I'm assuming you'd see Kelly Douglas. You could go see HY. Like,
But even Western Grocers was on its own for a long time, right?
I
Like
think
there was
so.
a head office in Calgary.
we lost
We
him.
lost him.
Well, he'll come
Yeah.
back on.
Yeah.
But I'm
yeah.
just wondering. See, because it's hard. It's hard. Like when Ken comes back on, we'll do it. But it's sometimes it's hard to understand it, because now when you and I, or I go on my rant, or you go on the rant too, is we're ranting about very few. Like there is no, I mean, really, all that's left out here, to large part, is the Jim Pattison Group.
Yep.
There's the
There's
HY Louis
London.
Group, which
Yeah,
London.
HY Louis. Yeah.
And then there's really no other independents per se.
Yeah.
I mean, they've all been either swallowed up or moved into Pattison. So anyway, we'll get when Ken gets back on, we'll get some perspective on that.
guys, sorry about that.
That's okay.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. No worries.
So that was my first exposure to this whole incremental spend thing. You'd commit to a certain spend with Kelly's, and you're right, Ken. That, in my opinion, from a standpoint, from a perspective of Western Canada, was the beginning of asking for incremental spend,
right?
And not necessarily getting the value for the money that you were putting out.
So even at that time.
Yeah, so we're talking at that point in time. We're talking. I moved to Vancouver in 1980. I took over as BC sales manager in 1982. So that's the exact timing.
Okay.
1982-ish.
But so even at that time, because my understanding, because I didn't come into large retail too much later, but my understanding is even at that time, probably for the next 10 years after, like, yes, they would go after incremental, but if they asked you for, let's say, $5,000 worth of spend, like you were still chalking up $50,000 to $100,000 worth of PO.
Yeah.
Like you would get something out of it, right?
But
listing fees were what? Non-existent, existent.
But he said, but Ken said earlier before he dropped off that turned into a forward buy, really.
Right.
Like not necessarily. Ken, is that right? Like like not necessarily incremental, just a forward buy.
Just a forward buy.
Exactly. So they would run the promotion. It became clearly evident. You got to remember that at that point in time, data, there was no such thing as scanning data. There was Nielsen data, and it was in the form of a gray book, and you had to have literally a bookcase to maintain the data. And the data typically was 30 days old or 60 days old.
I would say a minimum 30, probably then, maybe 60 to 90, right? You're way out.
Yeah, but all you knew was what you were shipping.
Right.
And what was clearly evident was there had been a forward buy, that forward buy, and we go back in and we'd say, guys, that promotion really didn't work. So we'd get what was called a rerun. They would make good. It was much more civilized back then than what it is today. You would at least get, an incremental flyer ad for your activity. So that was the beginning.
Ken,
Robin Hood.
Can I'm just going to put you on pause for a second, because I think if we've got new brands listening, I think to set some context, right, is what we are talking about is, when you start selling to retailers, there's kind of like, there's a set of conditions that you come in under. There's some terms, there's you shipping the product. There's the suggested retail that the retailer is going to set, and some margin that the retailer is going to make. You're going to sell it at a specific cost. When Ken starts talking about incremental spend, this is kind of like what I just described as the basics of retailing. Is you've got a cost, the retailer sells it at a higher price, the retailer makes the gap between your cost and their retails, right?
Yeah.
And you sell based on the volume you sell. But incremental spend now becomes something where, this is the start of, and it's important, right? Because everything we talk about from now on in is about what wicks away from your cost that you sell into the retailer and what you actually make profit on, in between your kind of like, call it your dead net cost or your cost of goods to how you sell it into the retailer. Because the retailer this is the start when they start to get clever about, hey, you know what? We're realizing that there's extra value to you selling, to you jumping into a flyer. We'd like you to spend a little more money here. We'd like you to spend on a marketing play there. And then what you heard is already in the 80s, you've got a relationship where it's like, hey, we figured out that there's more money to tap here. We're going to go to a brand to get it. And then there may or may not be results, but that's okay. So that's kind of like, so for you, the listener, if you're new to this game, this is really important, because what Ken is outlining is the beginning of the hot simmer or the volatile explosions that you get from like a Kenny and I or anyone else in this game, right? Because now you're like 30 years in the making,
40 years fast forward.
40 years fast forward to why we're kind of at a boiling point. So
I think it is important to ground this and say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
listen to Ken right now, because this is sort of the beginning to the end is not the way to say it, but it's the beginning of
it's the beginnings of where we are right now.
Where we are today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'll unpause you now and then let you continue.
Okay. Sounds
good context. Good context. Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next step in my career, and that was with Reckitt. An opportunity to take over Western Canada from my current role as BC sales manager, and so now you're involved in the total Western Canadian business from BC right through to Manitoba. I had come from Winnipeg, had a pretty good relationship with, ultimately was the core group with Western Grocers in Calgary when they had moved to Calgary. And that's where I guess things started to speed up, pretty quickly. Western Grocers in the latter period moved their office from Winnipeg. They consolidated everything. They had branches in Winnipeg, Regina, Brandon, Dauphin, Flin Flon, The Paw. There was Shelley Western. There was all of the Western Grocers. There was Kelly Douglas. That all got consolidated in the Calgary office.
Yeah.
The core group there was the Winnipeg guys. I think it was 1991. Obviously, Superstore was starting to ramp up the whole private label thing, the whole no-name business. I think it was 1991. I was in Vancouver. I got a phone call from Martin Cox. Martin Cox was the president of Safeway West. And at the time, Safeway was running flyers in each province. There was a different assortment in each province. There were some common assortments, but there were some differences. I got a call from Martin, and he said, "Ken, can I meet you in Calgary?" I said, "Yeah, sure, Martin. No problem at all." Met him in Calgary. I think it was the Petrocan building. He had rented an office there. And what he wanted to talk about was synergies. Where they had common listings across the bandwidth of Safeway West, where we had different flyers, and they were going to run a front page where there was synergies, where there was common listings across the board. And again, it was all about, getting some extra ad activity. They saw what was happening with Western Grocers. They saw what was happening in terms of critical mass around Western Grocers and the leverage that came from that. And we worked out a few deals. but that was the beginning of ultimately what turned into Safeway moving their head office. I mean, and the response to this bigger is better, and bigger carries a bigger stick than anything else.
And when you're talking
your
synergies, Ken,
rules.
at the synergies at the time, they're asking for product synergy. Like
Yeah.
we're not talking yet about,
Ah.
hey, not just product synergy, but maybe we should have the same price for all 4 provinces, no matter where it comes from or how much it costs to get anywhere else. Like
Yeah.
we're just talking product at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll
Exactly.
stop throwing up now because
Well, you start to
say
see, you start
synergy
the demise
and
of the
I go
whole freaking
blind in one
system.
eye, and
Oh,
you know,
Jesus. Okay. Go on.
yeah.
So lived through it all. I mean, at the time, Reckitt was, at the time, they were nowhere near what they are today, but they were actively involved in building their own critical mass with acquisitions and product development. There had been an acquisition in 1992. They purchased Lane and Fink, which was Lysol, and brought
Oh, yeah.
that under the
Okay. Yeah.
fold.
Yeah.
Into the fold. And when they did that, that combined with the fact that Western obviously was already there, Safeway had put their office there, Overway was up in the midst of relocating their office to Calgary. My understanding at the time was it was because of payroll tax. That was the excuse that was used, at least by Overway. Whatever. So the choice was mine in terms of Lane and Fink and the Lysol business. We had also acquired Boyle Midway, where the time was to relocate the office to Calgary, which we did in 1992. Moved the office there. And then the real fun began. I remember being called in by Western Grocers. It was all about meeting certain margin expectations, and that everybody had to toe the line in terms of what their expectations were by company, and that we simply weren't meeting those expectations, and that to glue our relationship, we really needed to ante up the spend. There were some lengthy spreadsheets that were provided to us in terms of what was required. So that was the beginning of ask. Okay, I mean that was the modern day ask, and probably Western Grocers was the pioneer in terms of really leveraging, additional money. No real performance guarantees. It was simply, we need this.
Okay, so Ken, I'm going to pause you again because, like, for the listener, this is another one of those moments, right? So, especially if you are a little brand and you're transitioning to big brands, or a little brand, or a brand, forget it. You're a brand and you're working with little or local retailers.
Right.
You don't have this. What you have is a more pure relationship of, do you sell? Do you turn? Are you good velocity on my shelves? I'm happy to make the profit off you that I can make, right? I, as a retailer, I will always want you to be a higher price point because I'll be able to make more penny profit. But it's all about a more straightforward relationship of, here's what you sell it to me at cost for, here's what I make off it, and I'm happy with the speed at which you're moving off my shelves. What Ken is now talking about is you stepping into categories. So as you step into big retailers, what you feel today is what they're like he's talking about in the 90s, is this notion of, if you're going to come into a category. So you hear this sometimes from Kenny and I, as you talk to brokers, all these folks in between, they'll tell you, hey, if you're going into cosmetics, you need to make sure that you've got 35 margin for the retailer to take home, that you've got 50 on certain categories, you've got 60 or 25 or 18, or like all these different numbers. And you kind of go, where does that come from? Right. Well, what Ken is talking about is some of the beginning of this, where the big retailers are now going, I don't actually care what your cost is. I'm telling you that in order for you to be on my shelves, I need to make X number of margin in order to be on my shelves, right? So it's another way of getting extra value or knocking around your bottom line to get the retailer what they need.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so unpause again. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the real beginning. Safeway, being Safeway at the time, it was all about promotion. There was no direct, so to speak, but there was let's call it the event promotions. When we get into the late 90s and into the 2000s, consumption numbers became much more readily available.
Right.
There was scanning data available. It was much easier for a supplier to say, am I getting value here or am I not? And that was dangerous ground for the traditional guys. And I'll call Safeway more, the traditional retailer,
Right.
in terms of, we've got this event activity coming up. The cost is X. We also had a pretty good deal through technology, and technology basically being live in terms of profitability, P&Ls, all the rest of it. We had it right down to the brand level. We could also take that data and marry it up, and we built a model, which was a promotion evaluation model, which said, you want this to do that. We can take a look at history. We can take a look at prior promotions. We can actually sit down and say, yeah, this promotion works or this promotion doesn't work. When we were dealing with Safeway, they would come up to us with the promotion of the month or promotion of the week and go to my key account guy and say, we've got this coming up. Are you in? Well, and can you get back to me by 4:00 this afternoon? We had this data down so fine. This is with Clorox. We had this data down to so well that we could plug it in and basically, without discussing it above mind level, say it works or it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And we could go back to the customer and say, we could participate if we could get this price point. We could participate if we could get this level of display. But as you're currently presenting it to us, no, it doesn't work for us.
But you still had the ability to do your ask,
Exactly.
sort of at that time.
Exactly. And the beauty of it, Kenny, was we could sit in front of the customer and say, with hidden numbers, we're not going to show them our P&Ls.
Right.
But to say to them, you know what, guys, this is what this looks like right now. Here's the dollars and cents of it. And you know what? I'm better off just sticking on the shelf at my regular shelf price than I am doing this promotion from a profitability standpoint.
Right.
And it was used at the time as a form of negotiation. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. If it didn't work and my competitor picked it up, I could sleep at night because you know what? I knew he was losing money.
Right.
And that at the end of the day, that's okay. If I'm making money and my competitor isn't, that's fine. And those are the Clorox days. And the Clorox days were really fun days because they were really aggressive with bringing a lot of brands up into Canada that hadn't been in Canada. You know, when I started with Clorox, total Clorox Canada was 8 people. That was it.
Yeah.
And we built it up from that. And, you know, again, through acquisitions, the Clorox brand in Canada, at the time, Javex, which was Colgate, owned the market in Canada. And we had an opportunity through Bob Chapman at West Fair because there was some goofy stuff going on in the marketplace with bleach. Bleach was selling at 99 cents.
I remember how much we used to sell.
And nobody was making money. The manufacturer wasn't making money.
Yeah.
Retailer wasn't making money.
We weren't making money.
It was a loss leader. Remember that term, Kenny?
Buddy, I remember 99 cents bleach, and I remember building ends of the shit.
If you take a look at the shelf lately,
I don't even know if you can find bleach anymore.
$7.99.
What?
Probably what it should have been back
For
then.
bleach?
Yeah.
It should
Yeah.
never been
Wow.
99 cents even at the time,
No,
at that time.
but
that's
but-
what happened.
99.
We drove it
Well,
right to the
99
ground.
cent bleach, nobody's making money.
No, it was a disaster.
Bob Chapman was Bob Chapman, and Bob had the reputation. He fired 2 warning shots. The 3rd shot, you're dead. He put the word out to them: you got to quit screwing around with these price points. They didn't do it, so Bob called in the key account manager at the time and said they're done. But not the key account manager, they had the buyer.
Yeah.
And the buyer said, well, Bob, there are no other national brands in bleach. And that's when I got a call from Bob Chapman, and Bob said, what does it take to bring Clorox bleach up into Canada?
Yeah.
Which, after a bunch of phone calls, we did. So we launched Clorox in Canada exclusively with Western Grocers. And the deal was it would be a 1-year test. We'd see how it went. Our price point at the time was $249, and we would take it down to $219. I mean, we wouldn't feature the hell out of it. And the deal was, is if it worked, we would open it up to the rest of the market. It worked, and we launched. And when we launched, ultimately, we bought the Javex name from Colgate and launched Clorox bleach nationally. Everybody was making money. It was simple merchandising. It was simply selling the product for what it was worth at a fair price.
Right.
You're not going to beat it up. You're just going to have it out there. So the other part about Clorox, really fun company to work for. A lot of acquisition. Everything from Burt's Bees. They already owned Brita.
Yeah.
And it was diverse. Ken, London Drugs was one of our favorite accounts because in terms of being a destination retailers, London Drugs was the destination for Brita.
And you don't have to say that.
Yeah.
I know Kenny's on this call, but you don't have to say it. It's okay.
Yeah, but
He knows it's true, though.
It's the reality. I remember.
Oh,
I
no.
remember
I know it's true too.
before Clorox got acquired Brita. I remember
Yeah.
walking into London Drugs on Scott Road and seeing an end cap display of these water filters. And I thought, what the heck is that? But London Drugs embraced it.
So we're
They
dating
jumped in.
ourselves, Ken, because I remember that too. I was in the Broadway store and then North Van. So like this is early 90s.
Yeah.
And we were building full ends of first couple years, the containers.
Yeah.
And then it was the single and 3-pack filters.
Yeah.
Ends, top to bottom, one SKU.
And you know what, Ken? It was a huge return for London Drugs because they were pure destination for Brita.
Absolutely. We went nuts on that product. I remember we sold so much of it.
Yeah. I mean, you long for those days. They were pure destination for Burt's Bees, another acquisition that we made later on.
Yeah.
They embraced it. And that's when selling was fun. That's when dealing with a customer that understood growing a category, you both make money, and you go full speed ahead. So that was Clorox. And then, at that point in time, things like Ask were coming up out of Eastern Canada. There were acquisitions in Western Canada. There was Sobeys acquisition of Safeway. There were things like harmonization, cost harmonization, all that fun stuff, and spreadsheets from hell.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally spent days and days working with our CAM in Calgary on the whole topic of harmonization. And that goes on. And I know as a lot of the acquisitions, and let's go into present day, the acquisitions that have come up with, I'm not going to name banners just to protect the innocent, but I'll give an example of the situation where the big guy buys the smaller guy and finds out that, wait a second, that guy's got a better cost than I do. You know why? Because they knew how to market, they knew how to merchandise, they knew how to do the business.
And it didn't cost the supplier a ton of money.
Yeah.
There was no asks. You bought it, like Phil said before. You bought it at a price, and you took care of the rest of it.
That's
so as a
right.
retailer, you bought it at $1, sold it for $2. If you wanted to go $1.49 because it was good for your business, you went $1.49. You didn't ask anybody anything. You just did.
That's
You
right.
didn't go ask, hey, can you reduce my cost to 75 cents so I can go $1.49 and remain whole?
Yeah.
Like that just didn't happen. You just did what you did.
But
It's
to your point though, Ken, I think like if you think of so the one that I like I'll name because I think this one makes a lot of sense. We've already kind of not made friends at Loblaws, so whatever. In my case, like I'll say like when Loblaws bought Shoppers Drug Mart, you know, the cosmetic guys were Shoppers Drug Mart is obviously a cosmetic destination, and I can tell you definitively that Loblaws is not a cosmetic destination. It was convenience at very best, right? But the practice at that time was when Loblaws bought Shoppers and they started reviewing cosmetic trade spend, their nose was a little out of joint that the Shoppers Drug Mart guys got much better investment than Loblaws did, and they went back to cosmetic guys to get the same level of investment, even though,
they probably did 1/10 the business, if that.
Yeah, they knew it, right? Like they knew it that like for a cosmetic company, whether it's any of the brand names, the CoverGirls, the Revlons, the whatever you want to name it, right? Like Shoppers would be by a country mile number one on that list of destinations and people who would sell a lot of cosmetics, and Loblaws would rank somewhere above Sobeys, right? Do you ever think of Sobeys for cosmetics? Nope. So you wouldn't really think of Loblaws either, and yet they went back to get the same spend for Loblaws, and they would push for, they would punish you for
you want
not
harmonization and price, harmonization and program.
fairly in quotations, right? So those things are,
But the acquisitions, and Ken, I'm sure you'll get into, the acquisition cause a lot of these issues too.
Yeah.
Because to your point, let's say I was doing DSD with Coopers, or I was doing DSD with Quality Foods. I don't give a shit who it is in the West. It's easy, right? Or do whatever West Fair owned in Alberta. But you were doing DSD and there was a DC account. Well, if your DSD guys were really easy to deal with and you hit your minimums and you had some influence, you could build an end, you could talk to the manager, you do some shit together, have some fun, you do some business. And the head office, you didn't have as much control, and you had to protect yourself from the scan backs and the buybacks and the bill backs and whatever backs you're going to get.
Yeah.
All the backs.
Once they start harmonizing, then they started penalizing. Well, you get a better price to them. You're thinking, well, because they're easier to deal with. And I didn't have all the hidden costs, because at the end of the day, what you're saying is bullshit, because by the time you guys clawed all this money out of me, you were paying less than them. Yeah. You just decided now to say, well, co-op doesn't count. Terms don't count. Defectives don't count. Scanbacks don't count. And you're thinking, well, what the hell counts in spend?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Like something's got to count. Like you're taking 20% out of me, but you're telling me I can't count that. But I don't have it. You're counting it as real money.
Yeah, exactly.
So how am I supposed to harmonize? If we harmonize, we should actually be going the other way. If you're paying what they're paying, I'm actually better off, as long as it's net. Like it's got to be dead net pricing. You guys can't have, dead net plus. It doesn't work.
Yeah. That's the evolution of trade spend. It escalated. I used to use the term promotion for profit, and really, should it be that way? Should you be making more money on a promotion, or should you be just growing your own share as a retailer, growing your share in that category? And from a vendor standpoint, growing your share in that category, it became one of promoting for profit.
I've never heard it said that way, and I think that's actually a fair way to say. What we lost sight of is the reason you did promotion, because you were trying to get a few more people in your store to sell that item in your store. And that's what it was. It wasn't necessarily profit driven. The high low in essence took care of the profit problem. You were a little more expensive every day, and then you dropped a little lower, so you gave people a treat, and it was really for your customers, right? It was like a thank you, thanks for shopping us. Here's a deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I got a few extra people, and maybe I steal from Phil's store and Ken's store, and then next week they steal back. But the world kind of ran okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it became, to your point, is that now promotions and any of the spend is I'm trying to make you whole. And I'm thinking, but if I make you whole, who's paying for all this?
You are.
Someone has to.
Yeah.
Which would have been then the supplier and ultimately the customer, because the deals weren't going to be as good if I didn't keep you whole.
Yeah, exactly. It really comes down to the whole evolution. EDLP, net pricing, was one of the things that evolved through all of this process.
Because that was a fallacy too. What net pricing? There's net plus.
Yep. But a lot of national brands, a lot of vendors embraced it because at the time they were being inundated with paper.
Exactly. Debits on debit on debit on debit on debit.
We're spending more time trying to reconcile paper than they were selling.
Right.
So I think a lot of vendors at the time said, yeah, I'm all in, but it became the new base.
Right. And it only remained net, dead net for about a year.
If that.
And I went longer because I was trying to make myself feel better, because would have been one of those. And I would also been one of those who forgot. I'd be thinking, okay, I used to do ads with this guy. I forgot they were dead net. So you charge an ad.
Yeah.
And then you get a call and you're thinking, oh, fuck, like, what do you want me to do now?
I already charged it.
I can't go back. So then you're trying to figure, okay, how do I make this up? And that's what we tried to do. But others would have looked at you and said, well, tough shit.
Too bad.
Yeah. So, you know what, guys, let's just fast forward again to the whole.
So get to today. That's where we probably wanted to go ultimately.
I think we covered pretty well the whole evolution of trade spend.
Ken, sorry, let me interrupt 1 second. Listing fees.
Yeah.
When did those become, from your memory, like when did those become the real another relevant bucket that sort of just appeared? Was there always listing fees, or was that something that evolved over time as well?
I think there were always some kind of listing fees at some point in time. You know what, Kenny? I can't exactly put a pin on it.
Would they have been like a free fill or just a partial discount to get in?
I don't remember fill per se, not in the categories that I was in. But I'm going to say late 80s, early 90s was when that started to come into play.
Because that was another windfall, right?
Exactly. And I know it's a pet peeve of everybody. I'm going to be the first one to acknowledge that. Yeah, there's a cost associated with the thought that's involved in terms of working down the inventory. Phil, I think you were involved in the cosmetic side of it?
No,
Yep.
I did. Phil was, yeah.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a brand new game. I mean, Burt's Bee has learned some real lessons in that one when you're talking cosmetics in terms of I've got a new flavor, I've got a new scent, and basically it was strip the old one out and ship a new one, buy back the old inventory and sell the new one. So yeah,
I think, you know what, Ken, I actually understand. Like, I think
I was actually okay with that.
I understand it a lot more because I think, when you've got a manual process and you're dealing with kind of 30,000 SKUs, you've got warehouse slots, you've got retail slots, those things actually make a lot of sense to me. I think where I don't understand it as much as, in today's game, you reset your slots, you reset your planogram maybe once a year now. Most of the paperwork is done electronically. Your warehouse systems are far, far more efficient than they ever were, when we were growing up in this industry. And so to me, this is one of those antiquated things that now becomes just a profit center, right? Because everything else is an electronic paperwork.
But you guys, that's listing fee dollars. I understood that what Ken was saying, like, I would do that periodically too. So let's say a vendor came and said, listen, I really want to be on the shelf. I look and say, well, good luck, man. The shelf's full. The warehouse is full. If they said at that point, listen, I'd be willing to buy the stock, the old stock. I'll get it out of your system. I'll deal with it somewhere else because I want my stock in. That is a listing fee to me. I understood that because otherwise you have to wait. I have to free up this real estate.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take a bath on it because it's not bothering me per se. If you want your product in that badly, I understand that. What I don't understand is sort of the extortion it sort of became. Where there was nothing on the shelf. There was nothing in the warehouse. This bullshit that it takes all this effort to list a brand and put it in a warehouse is horseshit. Because to your point, it's mostly automated, et cetera. It definitely didn't cost 80 grand a SKU to do this. Sure, there's costs involved. I get that. There's costs involved to do business. That's why you open the doors every morning. It seems a little bit silly that everybody else, the customer and the supplier, has to bear all the costs for you choosing to be in retail.
Yeah. I used to look at it. I guess I used to have a certain amount of. I understood the whole lifting fee thing because I'm sure as a category manager, as a buyer, you're absolutely inundated with all of these new products. And I've been in the business long enough. We all have to realize that there was a lot of garbage that was being put in front of them.
Totally.
And if you're really committed to it, kind of trying to use it as a filter in terms of if you're really committed to that brand and if you're really committed to this concept in terms of it making sense for both of us, then you better be prepared to pay to play. Unfortunately, what that does is for the big guys, that's not a real big deal.
No.
Because they can peel it off of the whole portfolio.
Right.
To pay for it, and they can look at it as an investment.
Right, but for the little guys, it becomes problematic. And to your original points were there was this relationship thing. In the old days, what it would buy you is some time, because sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months to get the product going, etc.
Yeah.
In the modern world, there's no time limit.
No.
You pay the money, you're not guaranteed time.
Yeah, and that I think Kenny has accelerated after I left the business. I've been away
Probably
for 7 years. It was starting to happen then, and I think when I left the business 7 years ago, it was what 6 months. 6 months, and you're dead.
Pretty much. If it's not going to move, it's not going to move. So whatever you spent is your problem.
Yeah.
Right.
We've all seen dogs being presented by. We've all presented dogs, and
for sure.
It.
What? Sure. Never, Ken, never.
Sometimes you listed dogs because there was a fee.
You know what, Phil? You've been in business for 38 years. When you go to a sales meeting and the concept is put in front of you and you kind of go, I'm not too sure about that.
Actually, it's even worse when you look at it and think, this ain't going to work. This didn't work 12 times before this.
Yeah, this is the repackaged version of the last piece of crap you tried to sell.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of we'll fast forward because I know we're dealing with time issues here, and I sent you guys off some of the data that I had looked at because I did a quick scan to try and refamiliarize myself with what's actually going on out there. And there was a great report that came out of the Advantage Solutions, and it was U.S. data. But it kind of fits in with this whole inflationary thing that we're seeing. And I think, guys, we're all on the same page of, when I left the business, I was seeing the 2% ask coming in. I was seeing all of the, and you're right, Kenny, extortionary stuff that was coming out from the big guys in terms of, we're not asking you, we're telling you. I used to call it the cold blue steel. You'd go in and have the meeting, and you had the cold blue steel right at your temple, and you said yes or you said no.
Yeah.
And as soon as you said no, it was boom.
Yeah.
Guys would, and I'm not talking about guys that I talk to in the industry. We're all responsible for this thing called a top line, and when you're faced with a situation that says, man, I mean, distribution is king here. And if I take a significant hit in my distribution, I don't have to worry about my key brands. I don't have to worry about my number one brands because they're not going to pull the pin on those. But we all have secondary and tertiary SKUs out there that would be at significant risk.
Right.
To say to the senior CEO, listen, don't worry about it. You know, don't fill your pants. We're going to negotiate this one. We'll get value back for this spend because you don't want to see that top line disappear. And that is the beginning of the end. You know, you've fed the monster.
Yeah.
Sure, you might have gone in with your CEO or whatever senior guy that you went in with, and heads were bobbed, and you managed to negotiate this, you negotiated that, and then Kenny, all of a sudden, you're late on an order, and there's a $10,000 debit.
Right.
And that's why I really, when you mentioned this whole topic, I really wanted to call it spitting. Everybody's heard of spitting chicklets. I wanted to call it spitting debits.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it was.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
that's sort of where it ended up, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would go in under the pretense with the CEO of, look at what we negotiated. And then all of a sudden, these other debits start flying in, a late order, a shorted order, the this, the that, the other thing. At the end of the day, you were paying the money, whether you wanted to look at it that way or not. You were paying the money.
Yeah.
So
You were-
we get
you know,
into
Ken,
the
You were like, I am not over that because I remember these days, and like, it probably is one of the ones of all the things I've seen. It's probably the one that still makes me the maddest. Is not only are you paying the money, but you're negotiating on your own money, right? Because at the end of every quarter, there'd be this series. There'd be a big pile of unpaid stuff that it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the retailer. They just shorted you the cash, but then someone from the retailer would call you to negotiate on money they owed you, right? So you're like, I don't
understand what you're doing.
Yeah,
just pay me what you owe me.
just pay me what you owe me. Oh, well, we could go through post audit. We get like, what is happening here? Like now I'm negotiating on my own money. Like
I'm negotiating how bad a loss or how good a loss I want to take.
Yeah. I'm
not going to get the $100,000 back. It's how much do I get back and how bad is it going to hurt?
Yeah. I think every major CPG had like a cost recovery group.
You have to.
These were bean counters that were brought in to chase this paper and go after it. And I think they got 50 cents on the dollar or 25 cents on every dollar that they recovered. And I think every CPG in Canada had somebody working in a corner office that was from outside that was working on the paper because it was getting in the way of all of our other business.
But the demise, though, Ken, if you think about it, that's great. That's great if you're Clorox and J&J. What do you do? You're the $1 million brand. You're the $2 million brand. I don't have 8,000 people sitting in offices and I can go pay some fucking consultant $100,000 a year to just go chase money that's mine anyway. And to negotiate, basically, you owe me 100, but I'll take 50 and give him 25 for getting me 25 grand of the 100 I was actually you stole. It wasn't yours. It was actually mine. And I had to negotiate a discounted rate just to get something. Like, how does that make any sense?
Because Ken, you were dealing with the highest common denominator. Okay. And sometimes the highest common denominator, this is kind of wacky sounding, but the highest common denominator, the big guy, is also the lowest common denominator in terms of what he's doing, what kind of precedence that he's setting. I have a lot of empathy for startups. I have a lot of empathy for the small guy that legitimately has some innovation. He has a product that makes a pile of sense, and trying to get into the marketplace, that's something that has a real place.
Yeah.
In today's environment, I don't know how to say it other than good luck with that. I mean,
That's what we say. Trust me, it's not just you.
Yeah.
It's not just you. Because I don't know what to say to people anymore either. I mean, I'll give you, because we talked about it. I mean, we're gonna run out of time probably, but it doesn't matter. We talked about, this inflation and these guys sitting down and explaining all the woes they have and how expensive it is to do retail. And then you got people like me who are actually in small retail who had to go shopping at the largest guy in the country yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at their prices and I'm thinking, how are they getting? I'll give you how are they getting $3.99 a pound for peppers?
Yeah.
When I'm at $1.99.
Yeah.
And because I've decided, because I'm local and I service my local neighborhood, that I got to give these people a break periodically. So I'm not going to make a ton of margin, but I'm half the price per pound.
Exactly.
And they're saying they're not making any money. If I'm making money at $1.99. And I'm a little rinky-dink shit store in East Vancouver, and I'm buying 1/10 of what that location is buying. Never mind the corporation. How can they not be passing anything on? How?
Yeah.
It's impossible.
I've got this thing. I'll call it this little vignette called Mary's Garden. They're a little, garden, market garden here in South Surrey, and they're seasonal. Typically seasonal, no different than most seasonal market gardens. I forget the one in Richmond.
Yeah.
But they just reopened the store, new ownership. Carol walked in and she said, "You wouldn't believe it. I mean, their prices on produce are, half of what she would pay at Kin's or at Save On Foods or at Superstore." And she said, "You know what, Ken? They had a really good selection,
right,
of canned goods and other groceries."
Yeah. So just so you know, our buying power isn't as good. Just so we're all very clear. So in case anybody's missing the point here, is the buying power of his little grocer or our little grocer is not the same as 1,000 stores. Just make it clear so nobody loses sight of what we're talking about here.
It's so when you see that and you say, "Wow, how is that possible?" If these guys are still making money being the little guy and they don't have that buying power, what are the big guys making?
Well, the thing is, Ken, what people need to appreciate, first off, we're not making a lot of money. What we're trying to do is fight off this perception of what the media and these guys are all fueling. There is inflation. There's no doubt. You'd have to be an idiot. I can see prices every single day on produce. I know there's inflation, but I also know the margins that I can take or need to take. I also know the neighborhood I'm in and what they can afford to spend. So I have to make decisions too, and so do they. And a consumer makes their decision where he or she shops. But understand, you keep supporting all the large all the time, whether it's a large supplier or the large retailer. Guess what you're going to get? All you're going to get is large. And I'm telling you right now, they're not passing a lot of the stuff on that they could. Right. And I know that puts, us in jeopardy because we have brands and we do business in this world. But, for Christ's sakes, I mean, that should be the sign for a lot of the smaller ones or the local ones to say, listen, you know what? Let's step up and let's try to do better, whatever that means. But this bullshit at Ottawa and these guys going in and doing this nonsense, I don't know what the hell the point. I don't know what the point. We paid for that ultimately, I'm assuming, right? As taxpayers. What did I get out of that? I have no idea what happened.
Not much, Kenny.
Not much. You got nothing. Less.
The whole code of conduct thing.
I don't even know what that means.
I called a few guys, senior guys in CPG, and asked them what they thought about it. Interestingly enough, the general consensus was they're taking a certain amount of comfort in it right now. It's a kind of I'm wishing that this works out. But the reality is this: apparently, it's modeled after a code of conduct thing that was developed in Ireland. But the question we all have to ask is this: does this just add more cost? If you're a CPG or you're a retailer, does this really, all it's going to do is it's another government agency, really. Someone's
going to pay for it, Ken. Someone's going to pay for it.
The arbitrators in this whole thing, and it's going to be at a cost.
Right.
So
But
it's
what's it gonna do?
it's also like super voluntary. Like it's
It's
not
toothless.
something that anyone needs to volunteer for. So you kind of go like, none of this makes any sense to me, right? Like, so it's voluntary. You could be part of it. They're going to realize like, oh, no one's going to be part of it, or someone's going to be, a handful of them will be a part of it, and then if you want everybody else, then you're going to have to enforce it, and it'll cost you more money, right? So like,
I don't understand. I don't understand how we do what we do. I really don't. And I don't understand the protection we give those who don't need to be protected, and how we don't protect those who should be protected. You know, we are protecting very few people who do very well with these large companies. And as a consumer base, we just don't. We have less competition. We're paying more than we should. I have no issue with profits. I think the three of us would be considered capitalists. I have no problem making money.
100%.
I own
Yeah.
businesses. I have no issue in doing this.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry to say, but this feels like a lot of times like legal extortion. And I don't understand what we're doing.
I use the word, Ken, extortion many times.
I know, but that's sad to use. That's such a strong word.
Yeah.
Right? That it should not be, we shouldn't float it so flippantly, but I don't know how else to describe it anymore.
Yeah. And I really, this is why I welcome the opportunity to talk to the two of you about this topic. I think I had mentioned to you, Ken, that I had talked to a personality from one of the major networks, a news network.
Yeah, you told me.
And it was at a social gathering, and she overheard a conversation that I was having with somebody else in the industry about exactly what we're talking about right now.
Mhm.
And it kind of caught her ear. And she pulled me over to the side and said, you know, I overheard your conversation. Can you tell me more? And I did, but I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really think you can sink your teeth into this one, because the minute you take it to your producer, the minute you take it to, they're not going to want to talk about it, because
ad dollars are gone.
Whether it's the retailer or the CPG, it's their bread and butter.
Yeah, your ad dollars are gone. It's over. Like you're not going to get not going to get TV ad dollars. It's So what do you get? You know what you get when you get a lot of the media, and I'm not faulting the individuals. I'm faulting the system. What happens is the dollar is always going to protect the narrative.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't get the truth. If you really want to know what's happening in CPG and in grocery, ask people like us.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell are you asking big corporate for? And again, it's not that Galen Weston's a bad person or these people are bad people. They're people. They feed families too. I get it. But you know, it's the fundamentals of how they conduct the business that's really offensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the part we got to get away from. It's not the person. Like, we got to stop picking. It's not, people are just people. It's a cog that you get stuck in. We got to try to fix this whole system.
Yeah. But you know what happens here, Ken, in today's day and age? You know, I'm retired. I'm looking for return on my investment. So all my investments are all about.
I get it.
What am I getting back?
Right.
And they're all, the publicly traded companies are all out there, you know, trying to maximize their return for their investors. And this is a reflection of that. And there are no rules.
Well, but I'm in the same boat. Like, some of my, you know, retirement money or money that I've invested is within a lot of these people too. So, you know, I can complain as much as I want, but I do support it, I guess, directly, indirectly as well. Like, it's part of the whole problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's that, you know, again, it's just, I don't know, man. It's funny. I was telling Phil, I got a call yesterday or 2 days ago from somebody in the industry. And what they did is they left a voicemail, not on email, not on text, nothing where it can be seen.
Yeah.
What you're saying is right, but we can't say anything because we still have to be in this business.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's great. So in essence, that is really what old school extortion sort of is.
Yeah.
Don't say anything on the street. I don't see nothing. I don't hear nothing. That's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Stay quiet. I'll do okay as long as I shut the hell up. Is that really how we want this game to play? That's our food, and things we buy every day is tied up into that. That's what we're in.
Yeah. I sent you guys that information that came out of this advantage in the U.S.
I'll
in
take a look
terms
at it.
of,
Yeah, I'll look at it too.
a lot of the things that were in part of inflation in terms of cost of goods, gas, fuel,
Sure.
moving items from point A to point B, et cetera, were beginning to reduce. And they did a poll with CPGs and asking them what did they intend to do? Were they going to reduce their price, or what were they going to do? And there was a high level of reluctance in terms of, am I willing to give that up? We all
How
know
can
that
they?
once you hit a price point, you're not going to walk away from it.
No.
It's just natural.
No.
So what were they going to do? The one that shocked me was that, what was the number? 50% said they wouldn't reduce their price, but they would consider trade-related alternatives. 50%?
The hell's that?
So
Trade-related alternatives.
So what does that
Okay.
mean? They're going to just give more money back to the retailer in trade dollars?
So I look at it this way. What is that then? What are you saying? It's a rainy day fund?
Apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually don't understand that at all.
I don't understand what the concept is.
Yeah.
I understand what you said begin. I understand if you're, let's say you're Kellogg's or whomever,
Yep.
and your Rice Krispies legitimately went up to $2 a box because of all we've talked about, and it comes down to $1.50. I'd probably hang on to two. Back, we are capitalists here, guys. Let's be clear. We're okay about making money.
Yeah.
This is not a non-money making show.
Yeah.
But I would understand that. But I also understand that I see invoices every single day on produce, and it fluctuates daily. And if I get a better buy, like if they get a better buy, I get a better buy, which in turn, guess what that means for the most part of my store? You get a better buy.
Yeah. Yep.
Like I don't mind the system working that way because that's fine. I mean, there's times where I'll try to make a little more because maybe I lost a little bit from the week prior and I'll catch up, but I don't mind passing it on. But you know, I don't know what anybody else is doing out there. I don't see it on the shelves of places I go to, but you know.
But you know what, Kenny? You're not thinking like a publicly traded company.
But I think that's the fundamental problem with that too, is that you're answering to very few shareholders.
Yep.
Again, you and I and Phil are probably part of that mess too, because we own some of these stocks too. So
in stocks
again,
and,
we're not coming across as the angels of society here.
Nope.
But you know, I don't know.
So, I mean, support locals, support the independent.
To me, that's what it comes down to. Support the
Yeah.
people in your neighborhood, because I tell you what, the only ones who give a shit about you is your family. And in essence, your neighborhood is your family.
Yeah.
So you might as well support your neighborhood, right? And that's, again, not to say that, you know, it's the big evil empires and you shouldn't go, because people who work in all these majors have families too. These are people.
Agreed. We just
Right?
need
So
to
we're not
find a
trying to
better
harm people. We got to
balance for
find a
how
better
you make
balance.
money.
Right? We're you know, more people are winning at this. And right now, most suppliers are not winning and most consumers are not winning. And yet we still hear record profits from the very, 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 very few who control most of the food.
Every one of them.
So sorry, guys, you know, you got to look in the mirror sooner or later.
Yeah.
Because there's only a few people suffering, or there's massive suffering and a few guys winning. So,
You know,
I don't know.
we started this conversation with, you know, changes in the industry. And, you know, when I was early in my career, 1984, inflation was running hard. Interest rates were running hard.
Well, they were super high.
And I can remember literally, was with Robin Hood and we were selling flour, and it was controlled by with a wheat board at that point in time. It was reviewed, I think, quarterly. It was just about every quarter we'd have to get on the phone and do a phone blitz in terms of giving our buyers the heads up that the price is going to increase, and you know, at the end of the quarter. And you know, if we had an order in now, we could buy it. And the interesting part, though, is I think, you know, at the point in time, a 20-pound bag of Robin Hood flour was selling for a good price, was a really hot price, was $3.99. And then it was $4.99, and that really didn't change over the span of. From that point, it really didn't change for probably 15 years. It was a pretty standard price point.
Right.
But a much different world today. a much different world.
Yeah.
Anyway, my friend,
Ken, thank you. So it was so nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you.
thanks for coming on, buddy. Seriously,
Yeah,
I do
we
appreciate it. Thank you.
really appreciate you coming on.
Well, I appreciate having the time to talk to you guys. I mean, I think, we all still, I still have, a passion for the business, and, it gets me cranked up when we get into, some of these topics. And
Gotta stay calm
I'll
like
say
me,
this.
Ken.
Pardon me?
You gotta learn to calm down like I do. You gotta stay calm like me.
Well, that's why God created Scott, Kenny.
Oh boy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, it's lovely talking to you. It's nice
Yeah,
talking to a guy who's
thank you
been
so
around
much.
too. And thanks for sharing some of the
Yeah.
stories. I think it gives people a bit of different
Yeah.
perspective as
Yeah.
to why some things play out the way they do over time, right? So
We'll have to get together and maybe have a coffee, a beer
absolutely,
together one day.
do it, man. All over it.
Yeah, I'd like
Okay,
it.
guys.
Thank
All
you,
right.
sir. Take care.
Thanks.
So Phil, Ken, you have a wonderful evening. Thanks for coming on.
You too, guys. Take care,
man.
man.
I can. That was a cool
Well, it's
story.
interesting, right? Because these guys have been around a long time, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's I hate that it's always ranting, but it's just really frustrating. Is really what it comes down to. It's just really
I think,
frustrating.
but you know what? Like, so what I love about this one is the context, right? Because
Yeah.
you just
Well, you can see why things happen
Yeah, you get a sense of why things happen,
and where they are now.
where they are now, and
Yeah.
and why would we have what we have, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Like
Anyway,
everything,
we're
I think it can
like-
get better.
We're like an hour 20, so that literally.
Okay, if
there's
anybody's
nobody
left,
else
thanks for
listening.
sticking around this long.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll chat with you later.
We'll chat with you later.